This episode of Over a Barrel is brought to you by Night or day, rain or shine, Valero keeps the pumps full 24/7, 365 with a reliable fuel supply. Because keeping pumps fueled keeps business pumping and communities moving right now. Coming up on Over a Barrel, it's now time to find out if we're going to be paying more, less, or about the same for gas prices coming up this year in the year 2025. Patrick's got his forecast right now on Over a Barrel. Well, welcome to the program. I'm one of the hosts, Matt McLean. That guy right there in the glasses,
Hello.
That's Patrick DeHaan. Well, Patrick, how are you doing, sir? Happy New Year to you. And
Happy New
I'm
Year,
telling
Matt.
you, right?
Wow,
Oh.
2025 is here. Hopefully you had a wonderful New Year's Eve.
It seems like yesterday it was 2024. Oh, wait. Anyway, the point is, yes, I did have a great New Year's. Everything has been fantastic so far. Knock on wood. I don't eat black-eyed peas like that little tradition that's always, you're supposed to eat that for good luck. I've never done. Of course, that usually describes how my years always end up interesting, so we'll find out. But anyway, yes, so gas prices. Let's talk about this. You always do an annual forecast. You always tout, and quite honestly, even though I tease and pick on you when we're not on the air, I give you compliments on this one. You're usually right when it comes to this. Document it, write it down. I usually don't admit to that kind of a thing. Everybody inside of Gas Buddy's mouth just dropped whenever they heard me actually compliment you. I'm just saying, no, I'm kidding on that. But talk to me about some of these gas prices. I last week said, I think we're going to pay just a scotch more, just a little bit more.
I remember that.
Than I know. I remember it like it was just earlier, right? So, I mean, it's
very different. You know, Matt's New Year's resolution is to pay a skosh more for gasoline, and everyone else is like, I want to lose weight. I want to pay less on gasoline. I want to get paid more. I want to waste less.
I would love to pay less.
We all have our New Year's resolutions. And by the way, the one, if you want to pay less on gas, is to use the Gas Buddy app paired with Pay with Gas Buddy, because you can save up to 30 cents a gallon when you use deal alerts. Now that's actually an increase compared to our old card that we had. So check out the Pay with Gas Buddy card and use deal alerts. But if you're also listening to us or watching us on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, throw us a like, subscribe, a follow, and give us a comment on what your New Year's resolution is, how much you are hoping to not spend on gasoline in the year ahead. But Matt, let's not wait any longer.
No, let's get to it.
2025, our yearly fuel price outlook is Americans will be spending less on gasoline in the year ahead.
What?
So I know you said last time we talked that you thought it was going to be a bit more. Now, there are some risks, so you're correct. There's a little bit more risk to our forecast this year. But let's scroll down to the end take, is that we expect the yearly U.S. average in 2025 for gasoline to be $3.22 a gallon. That's about 11 cents lower, Matt, than what we saw in 2024. So all in all, folks are going to be spending a little bit less. You know, if you check our socials, check the Facebook or the Gas Buddy blog, you can get access to this full forecast. So download it all, check all the details, Matt. But here is the end goal. Americans this year, we expect will be spending nearly $411 billion on gasoline. But by the way, it's about $115 billion less than what they spent on gasoline in 2022. So you are going to be spending less, my friend.
Well, I hope that's right. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to mark this footage, and come December of this year, I'm gonna pull up I'm gonna re-rack this footage right here on our two differing of opinion on this, and we're gonna find out who's right. I'm gonna laugh if we're both wrong.
No, I'm getting a little nervous.
No, I want to find out. I hope I am wrong. I hope I pay less. I hope you are, and you usually end up being right. And the only way both of us could be
bet
wrong
on this.
Yeah, I mean, the only way both of us could be wrong is if we're paying the exact amount as what we paid last year in 2024. So, I mean, and if that turns out to be the case, we should both buy lottery tickets.
Something.
Right? We should both buy lottery tickets.
I say low, and it ends up being the exact same thing. That sounds like it'd be a really boring year, but. You know, Matt, also, as we teased last year, we do get into the weeds here in some of these areas. So, if you're in one of these cities, Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, Cleveland, DFW, Denver, Detroit, Houston, LA, Miami, all of these cities, we're basically telling you what we expect the highest the daily average will be. This is not the specific station, Matt, because if you go to Orlando, it would be $5.95 a gallon because at one station near the airport. So this is the highest that we think the average price on any given day will be in these metro areas. It's not the individual station. It's not hard to find those folks, like I said, near an airport that like to jack up their price.
Right. Yeah, that's key. You and I have both driven in the same vehicle. We have been in the same vehicle and driven by those particular stations you were talking about in Orlando. Yeah. And I was like, that can't be right. And you're like, no, you need to learn the stories about. I'm like, oh my Lord. Yes, there's
a lot of those, by the way. For those who live in Orlando or Miami, you're very aware of what those stations are. And I'm sure there's other airports, LAX too. So, I know most folks are back from the holidays, Matt, now, but next time you're renting a car near a major airport, that's especially a perfect use case for Gas Buddy so that you're not lured into stations that are charging you $1 or $2 a gallon more than everyone else. But also in this forecast, Matt, July 4th, we have 80% confidence that on July 4th, the national average will be somewhere between $3.31 to $3.58 a gallon. So now you can pack up the extra ribs, bust out the boat, and go sailing if you like. But gas prices, we expect, are going to be modestly affordable this year.
Yeah, I hope so. From your lips to the crude oil supplies. I hope so.
and by the way, I want to point this out because, we are seeing a switch in administration in the White House. Just notice here, we expect the yearly national average in January to be a 306. It's up in February, up in March, up in April. So I know there's been a lot said depending on what your political beliefs are, but my political beliefs are, well, as an analyst, I don't believe in political beliefs. I believe in getting it right. So we believe gas prices will go up this spring. They will probably be at their highest in April. May, there's a little bit of risk there as well before they start to trend lower. And look, Matt, by the end of the year, our familiar friend comes back, $2.89 a gallon next December. Or I should say this December. See, that's the only other thing of the new year. I'm still getting those wrong.
Yeah, no, and listen, I hope it's right. I actually hope that you're wrong in that we pay even less than what you're predicting we pay. I'll put it that way. I'm still my $1.99 a gallon.
I knew it.
I'll probably be that way, and for the next 30 years.
$1.99 gas. He wants me to be wrong.
I mean, come on. I mean, who would complain about that, right? I mean, but that's, I know. I got to be a realist. I spend enough money on gasoline as it is because I drive, and that's just a part of it. So, but all right. Yeah. So getting into some of this stuff. So
the details.
All right. So first of all, I've heard you say during this podcast, and let's face it, we've known each other for 15, 16, blah, blah, blah years. I've interviewed you as a news anchor and reporter probably several hundred times before.
Maybe more than anyone else, by the way.
Very, very possible, right? And I have heard
you say, there's no case.
Right. But I have heard you say, first of all, incoming presidents only get so much ability to influence price no matter which political party they're in. I've heard you say this for many, many years. I have heard you say summertime is not the time where gas prices traditionally are the highest. I've heard you say that. And I have heard you say during the springtime when everybody's in a panic mode prior to Memorial Day weekend, when the price all of a sudden starts going up and it becomes the top news story everywhere and everybody starts getting into a tizzy wondering how bad it's going to be during the summer, usually you are the voice that comes out unless there's some sort of an extenuating circumstance that says, hold on, this is normal. This is what we see every time in the spring. Everything's going to be okay. By July, this is going to be a distant memory. Prices will be back. So I hear you say these things over and over and over again. So I'm just going to make you say them again. Talk to us about all of this stuff. Give us the rundown. And this is January, so we're going to get to hold you to it throughout the year. So what are we thinking as far as the spring? You're seeing kind of an uptick, obviously. And I know you're going to explain.
I've got a whole section here just for you.
Yep.
I've got a whole section. So, Matt, I mean, to your point, the only thing that's consistent with gas prices is inconsistency. Lower in spring, lower in early winter, higher in late winter. They rise through spring and early summer, and then they start to trend lower. So, for those of you who want to get in the weeds on this, again, check our socials or the Gas Buddy blog. You'll be able to read the specifics of what we're thinking. But I mean, volatility is one thing that happens every day. Geopolitical tensions, changes in the U.S. presidential administration, seasonal disruptions, and industry challenges are all what contribute to a change in prices from one season to another. The change to summer gasoline and increase in demand are all of what are going to happen this spring. That was true, with President Biden. It's going to be true with President Trump. It's just we drive more, we switch to more expensive blends of gasoline. The details, though, on fuel price volatility, well, one of the most significant drivers of fuel price volatility can be geopolitical tensions. Oil markets, we've seen, they're very sensitive to things like the Middle East, different wars. There are threats. Tariffs potentially could impact prices. There's a lot of different things, including impact on countries like Venezuela and Iran. President-elect Trump has promised on going after them a bit more vigorously than we saw. The influence of presidential policies, we've mentioned that, the potential of tariffs, economics, policies emphasizing renewables or stricter government regulations or going the opposite way can all have tremendous impacts potentially on prices. So if you really want to get into why we're thinking about our forecast, why we see this certain way, Matt, these slides here, these brief summaries of factors, the seasonal factors, hurricane season, refinery constraints, current events, and economic volatility. I mean, this is all what goes into why we expect prices to be the way they are. And hopefully, these are designed not for somebody with a degree in petroleum economics or drilling or geology. These are all basically reduced to factors that people can understand. And by the way, diesel is here too. So if you don't drive a car, if you drive a truck, a semi, an RV, we also break down the month by month for diesel. Which, by the way, is a little bit the opposite of gasoline. Diesel prices tend to be lower in the summer and higher when it's colder. So good news there is we're also expecting a modest improvement in diesel, Matt. Yearly national average of $3.48 a gallon. A little bit more uncertainty in the winter. But again, then we go into our outlook commentary. As we transition to a year, obviously a lot is going to be changing in the weeks ahead in terms of policies, OPEC's production strategies. Obviously, we've been in a bit of an economic rebound globally, with the exception of China, and a change in the transition to EVs certainly could have impacts. But all of the details, Matt, this is, if you really want to know before anyone else knows, read our forecast. It talks about the economy, stability, refining dynamics, emerging markets. I mean, there's a lot of factors, Matt, that basically go into it, and we basically spell it all out here.
Okay, now I do have one question. At the very beginning, I said, incoming administrations, different presidents, they've only got so much ability to impact that price. Usually it's a lot less than what most people fear. And of course, there's the campaigning season. Everybody in politics uses crude oil and other aspects, medical insurance. They take the hot topics, right? The hot potatoes, and they say, well, I'll do this if you elect me, and I'll do this if you elect me. It's universal across the board. With that, let me draw a little asterisk here. Isn't there a way that would tariffs be one way that any administration could have a direct impact on crude oil pricing and or gasoline? Isn't that one way that they can single-handedly end up doing something that could impact the price?
Well, let's just say it this way, Matt. It's a lot easier for a president to have a negative impact on the price of oil than a positive one, meaning it's a lot easier for the president to make up a policy that really negatively affects oil and makes the price shoot up, much easier than it is for a policy to be implemented that would cause prices to plummet, right? Because this is a free market commodity. So the president can put things like arbitrary rules, taxes, regulations on businesses to drive costs up, but he also can't compel them to drill more. He can't compel them to spend more on drilling. He can't compel them to simply take less profit margin because it's a free market. So to your point, there are policies that can have a larger negative impact on prices. It's far easier for that than a president to have an impact that is much more positive on prices. And tariffs are a real threat. I personally think that it's a lot of talk, because I think at the end of the day, I'm hopeful that the president has enough smart people around him that will eventually say, this is going to backfire. This is going to cause a large negative impact on an issue that he is very serious about, which is affordable energy, right? How many times in his administration have we already heard on the campaign trail, drill, baby, drill? They want to unleash American energy. So, there's a lot he can do, but tariffs are kind of the opposite of drill, baby, drill. They could have a very chilling impact on things like global trade. So that is one of the potential risks to our forecast. I'm thinking that the Trump administration won't move ahead with tariffs. If they do, well, it could get a lot uglier, and that's a risk in our forecast.
Don't touch that device. We've got more Over a Barrel coming up right after our sponsor, Valero.
All across America, you'll find Valero at your go-to gas station, volunteering with local charities and fueling communities 365 days a year, so you can always get where you need to be, right now.
And now for the rest of Over a Barrel. Yeah, and that maybe, who knows exactly what could happen there. Yeah. That drill, baby, drill, he may want to try to, as just one potential avenue, try to get American companies inside the borders to drill more oil. But that's not really necessarily as practical. In other words, you can't do that overnight. That takes a little bit of time. So, there are some potential avenues, of course. But yeah, I mean, a lot of this times we have seen things as almost a bargaining tactic more than anything.
Right.
And that we saw with the first administration, his first time in the office. A lot of the times it was, this is what I want to do. I'm going to go out and kind of use the bully pulpit. All presidents do it. They just have their own styles of the way that they do it. Right. And this happens to be his. And so he goes out and he goes, if you don't give me what I want, this is what I'm going to do. And he'll start talking this, and this, and then he ends up getting his way, and then those things just don't end up happening. So, and that's just, again, everybody's got their own style. It doesn't matter the political party. Everybody's got their own version of how they use the bully pulpit, so to speak, in the presidential Oval Office. That's exactly. Just a very normal aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Exactly to your point, every president, they may have a strong arm negotiation approach. They may have a soft arm approach, but everyone's approach is different. Just kind of what we spoke about last episode, where, everyone's got a little bit of a different approach to how they do things. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, whenever there's a change in the Oval Office, it could be the same party. There's always going to be a change in the stance between whoever was in the Oval Office and who's in there now. So there are risks, but at the end of the day, they may not all be negative. They could have a positive impact if oil companies do produce more, if OPEC raises production in response to a potential threat or a potential business deal. That would probably be good for consumers. So, I mean, one thing that's already happening is that the natural gas sector, projects are already starting to be implemented again or reopened again on the hopes that they're going to be greenlit very quickly. So, I mean, and we'll be talking a lot about this in the weeks and months ahead. This is not just, applicable to now, because politics kind of have a role on prices. I was talking to a reporter. One thing that makes it very difficult for a president to forcibly push prices down is the simple fact of the cost of doing business. Things like state gasoline taxes are not in the jurisdiction of the federal government. States have freedom to set their gasoline taxes based on their own legislatures. And that's one thing the president can't just force them to abandon. So there's a lot of different, differences between the state and federal policies. But at the end of the day, there could be some really interesting curveballs, Matt, in the next 4 years. And that's what we highlight in our 2025 Fuel Outlook, is that, as we get reacclimated to President Trump and what his policies may look like this year, there's a little bit more risk in our forecast. That risk will probably decrease as we get to know and really see President Trump in the White House again.
It's really weird to say it this way because I just feel old in saying it. But the last two-term president that we had in office was Barack Obama from 2008 through 2016. Every election cycle since then, we have had a different
back and forth,
right? And then, and prior to that, the only other time in my lifetime where it was a single-term president was President George H.W. Bush, coming out of Ronald Reagan, and just prior to Bill Clinton being elected, he served a 4-year term. That's it. I think Jimmy Carter in the late 70s served, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but served a single term as well. And I may be wrong on that. So don't beat me up if you're watching.
Well, you see here
that
the great theme here is that the American people go back and forth. I mean, if one party gets too much power and consolidates power and writes a lot of really, anti-whatever laws, America's pendulum swings both ways.
Yeah. So we're seeing really an interesting dynamic since 2016-17 in that every 4 years rather than every 8 years, we've seen transferring in administrations from one side of the political spectrum to the other. That has to be interesting for an analyst like yourself, because prior to that, and you were in obviously with Gas Buddy prior to 2016 for a good number of years, there's consistency when you have an 8-year block versus a pendulum every 4 years. It's almost compressed as to the way things move back and forth. So, I mean, there's a lot there to be said for an 8-year block of time and how you can consistently move things along in the economy as your administration wants to versus a 4-year block, a 4-year block, a 4-year block. Now, the incoming administration has 4 years because he will have served 2 terms. So he's done. So we're going to have yet in 4 years from now, we'll have another
big
change.
chapter change. Yeah. So,
yes. So we automatically know for the next 4 years, we've got a period of 4 years, and that's what we've got.
Right. And really here, as we navigate the first part of 2025 and Trump is sworn into the Oval Office and the White House, the question is, how long will it take us to kind of reacclimate ourselves with Trump's policies? What will they look like? How many surprises will there be? Will there be risk? Was a lot of what he was saying on the campaign trail realistic, or, was it just political speak? So we'll have to be analyzing all of that. But at the end of the day, you can look this up and folks can agree to disagree. But generally speaking, Republicans have been for less regulations and lower spending, although that hasn't been true in the last 10 or 20 years. And there was an interesting piece in the Wall Street Journal about how both political parties have been spending. And Democrats have a little bit more regulation, a few more rules, things formalized in that way, a little bit more protection. So that's just the difference. And when one political party switches out and goes to the other, it's, I would think in this time, there's a lot more, and I was talking to a couple of friends about this, there's a lot more undoing of the past administrations now that has been occurring. And that adds risk to what we expect, right? If a lot of these policies are completely reversed, if President Trump undoes completely the transition to EVs, or if he even, there was, I think it was Montana, even like 2 or 3 years ago, was going to outlaw EVs. If there's a lot of this tit for tat, there could be, uncharted waters and how that could affect oil and gas prices moving forward. But I think, Matt, that the undertones here is that China, China, which obviously is vastly different than the U.S., they're not going back when it comes to the EV transition. Their gasoline demand is probably permanently peaked behind them. The biggest question is, what will our energy transition look like? I think, when you talk about the oil industry, there's a lot of folks bearish on the oil industry right now just because President Trump is likely to lead to lower energy prices. And so that's bearish for oil companies. But there's a lot to keep track on. You have to expect the unexpected and predict the unpredictable. So in our forecast, we try to do that. But we've highlighted a lot of risks here to our forecast. You've mentioned some really interesting points. The Middle East, obviously, there have been a lot of active situations there, and we just don't know what could change in the year ahead. Will the President Trump, will he go after OPEC for cutting production? There's just so many different things that could change like the wind blows.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it in past episodes, myself owning a business, it's really tough to come up with a 12-month forecast. It's really tough to figure out 12-month goals. I do 30, 60, 90, a 6-month, which is very loose, and 12-month, it's basically, I have found over the past 5 to 6 years, I throw a dart at the wall and hope. And that's the truth. And I think I'm not alone in that. I think a lot of business owners have small, medium, large corporations, you can kind of see which way you think the wind is going to blow, but it's tough. So you feel fairly confident in your 30, you're 60, sometimes you're 90, but really anything beyond that, sometimes it can be really tough to figure out how to move your business along, no matter what profession it's in, no matter what you're doing for a business. I don't care if it's a restaurant. I don't care if it's a large corporation. It's really tough to kind of figure those things out as you're moving things through. And yes, some consistency would be kind of nice for the economy, I think, as well, for much longer term. A little bit of calm, just a little bit of a.
That would be good for markets, a little bit more confidence.
It would be great. It would be great. Just everybody take a deep breath and relax, and then just kind of let things go,
Speaking of gas prices, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty, but when you look back at what we expect here, Matt, month by month, I mean, there's a lot of, if we look here, it's basically real similar to what we spent this year, Matt. I mean, You talk about lower gas prices in the winter. And if you're not watching us on YouTube and not seeing the graphics, go on over to YouTube, our Gas Buddy channel on YouTube. You'll be able to see all the video. But essentially, Matt, this is a very much synonymous with a normal year. Gas prices are lowest in the winter. They start going up in February and March as we transition to more expensive blends of summer gasoline. By the way, California will probably start going up in February more so than other areas because they are a little bit earlier to make that transition. But ultimately, Matt, I think that the difference this year, instead of being in the mid and upper threes, we're kind of in the low to mid threes with the yearly national average of about 11 cents a gallon lower when it comes to gasoline. Again, if you're in California, we did break this down by states because we do know that there's a lot of differences in state. Matt, for example, you in Kentucky, the yearly average in Kentucky, $2.92 to $3.29 a gallon. So basically, we think you'll have sub $3 prices for a good portion of, probably January, February, maybe into March. But then Kentucky will probably be above $3, April, May, June, July, August, and could slip back below $3 in September, October, November, December. So keep in mind, this is something that is averaged out. This is the yearly average for your state. California, you're going to be somewhere in the ballpark of $4.50 to $5.07 a gallon for a yearly average. Now, keep in mind, California, Matt, is one of the areas that can have really ridiculous refinery outages, in that they only have 9 refineries. So California, there's a little bit more risk to what we're saying here, but your average will probably be somewhere in the mid to upper 4s or low 5s. Hawaii, also an average of the mid to upper 4s, but most of the other folks here, Matt, there's a lot more 2s. Colorado, like on the low side of things, there's a lot more states that could average somewhere around the $3 a gallon mark this year. And Texas, look at that, by the way, one of the cheapest states. We expect the yearly average in Texas to be somewhere in the ballpark of $2.76 to $3.10 a gallon.
I've got a question for you.
Ooh, this is going to be a good one.
I've never asked you this question. I'm confident I have never asked you this question, and we have known each other for a long, long time. And I'm not sure you're going to know the answer. I'm going to find out. Is there an altitude difference when it comes to how you pump gas and how much that gallon actually means? In other words, are the gas pumps
volumetric differences?
Are the gas pumps in Colorado set the same as the gas pumps, let's say, at sea level in Florida?
Most pumps are adjusted for temperature based on volume. But to your point, yeah, I mean, the factor out there, Matt, is the octane of the fuel. Essentially, a gallon is still a gallon, but the octane of the fuel is lower because you're higher altitude. And so the air isn't as dense. So manufacturers, refiners out in higher elevations in areas like Utah or Colorado. When I was out on my road trip to Las Vegas, from Chicago to Las Vegas, yeah, right around Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, a gallon is still a gallon. But generally the octane is lower because the air is not as dense when your car is running because you're in higher altitude. So you don't need the amount of octane. And that's why those areas are still areas where you'll find 85 or 85 and a half octane, Matt. So
Oh,
that's the difference.
so
A gallon is
okay.
still a gallon, but the octane rating can be lower because the air is not as dense in those higher altitudes.
So basically, an 85 octane, for example, in like a Denver is the equivalent of like let's say an 87 octane in Tampa. Is that what I'm
Well,
hearing you
Denver.
say?
Well, yeah. So Denver's still a mile high. So yeah, in Denver you may find 85, and that's what I did. But yeah, generally speaking, because Denver's still a mile high and Tampa is closer to sea level, that's why you don't need as much octane because the air is not
I
as
see.
dense at sea level as it is 5.5, 6,000, 7, 8,000 feet up, and that's why when you're traveling in those higher altitudes, you see lower octane fuels.
So motor. See, he did know the answer to this. See,
And
I
by the
thought
way, no
I had.
manufacturer approves lower octane gas, so that's a
Right.
conundrum. And when I was in some of these areas, I opted for mid grade at a much higher price because I don't want to see my engine pinging or seeing any pre detonation at higher altitudes. So yeah, I mean that's exactly why. And folks in those areas, Matt, the folks that have 85 octane know they've always had 85 octane, and that's why it's 85 octane because higher altitude.
Understood. So a vehicle that requires premium, for example, they don't necessarily need to freak out if they can't find the normal 92 or 93 octane premium if they're traveling for vacation or whatever and they're
It may
moving
not be the end
toward.
of the world, but especially if they're towing a vehicle,
Mhm.
or say it's a pickup truck that requires premium and there's only 91. Well, and by the way, that's generally why 91 is the basis for vehicles that need premium, is because 91. It's rare, especially in California, for you to be able to pull up to a pump. California's premium is almost always 91 octane
Hmm.
because there were some patents on 93 on how you
Really?
produce 93 octane that were under wraps. So that's California's a little bit different in that their premium goes up to 91. But then because of that, Matt, and because California is such a large state, that's why most manufacturers, when they require premium, their cars are tuned to run on 91 octane premium, not necessarily 93 octane premium.
Hmm. So it's kind of like Hawaii. If you ship your car over there before they let it out of the port, it has to be retuned. It's a state law. This part I know because I was in Maui for a while, and they require that you retune the car to configure to the emissions and the other aspects that Hawaii has to work with. Mainly because I mean, like think about it. You can go 12,000 feet in elevation and then back down to sea level in a matter of minutes on
Well, that's
Maui, for
something I
example.
have not heard, that in Hawaii you have to retune a vehicle.
Hmm.
So
They won't let it out of the port until it's been state retuned or whatever to let it travel on to it's a state thing. So I promise you that. They also do two inspections at the airport. They do a federal TSA and they do a state inspection for USDA
really
agriculture. You have to go through
fascinating.
two security lines.
Yeah, that's
So
that's 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 quite fascinating. But
you're
yeah,
not even allowed to take island to island. You're not even allowed to take a vial of sand island to island. They do a
oh yeah,
secondary
I
screening.
can imagine that, and
Yep.
that's
Or
just
produce. You're not allowed
exactly.
to do anything like that. So that's why they have the second line. Anybody who's been to Hawaii knows
Good thing I
exactly what
can
I'm
take
talking about.
gasoline from California to Arizona. Good thing that they don't check my tank at the border. That would be
Yep.
problematic. But that's one of the interesting things, is that you can travel over state lines with different gasoline in your tank, but the gasoline in the state that you're in is, you can never buy Arizona gasoline in California because of those mandates. All of that is kind of thought in, but as we get close to the end here, Matt, I think it's mostly good news for motorists at the pump to be spending a little bit less on gasoline this year, a year closer to normal. And at the same time, Americans are generally getting paid more. At the same time that there should be a little bit of gasoline deflation in 2025. So again, if you want to check out that full Gas Buddy 2025 fuel outlook, I really encourage you to do so. You'll find it on the Gas Buddy blog.gasbuddy.com. You'll be able to check it out on Gas Buddy's socials as well, things like Facebook and X and Threads. We're on Blue Sky. I don't know that we're posting there, but there's a lot of places for you to do that. And if you want to go to the Gas Buddy newsroom, gasbuddy.com/newsroom, you can also see the press release talking about the highlights of the forecast, and you can get a link there. But for now, Matt, it's going to be a really uncertain year in some instances, but I'm hopeful that hopefully by the time we talk next year about our 2026 fuel outlook, that what we see in the year ahead will have been accurate. So Knock on wood.
I'm looking forward to it. I think this year is going to be filled with exciting podcasts of twists and turns, and it's going to be a lot of fun. That's my prediction. That it's not worth anything, but it's still my prediction. I think it's going to be something. I think we're going to have some fun on this podcast. How about that? I made Patrick laugh. That's what matters, right?
And thanks for all of those who have joined us through a solid year. Another year coming to a close. Another year. It's going to be season 3 of Over a Barrel as we roll into the future, into 2025. So again, thanks for another year of joining us here as we start off 2025. We're looking forward to another solid year of keeping you updated. And boy, for Matt and I, wishing you a great start to New Year, and see you soon.
Bye-bye. This episode of Over a Barrel has been brought to you by night or day, rain or shine. Valero keeps the pumps full 24/7, 365 with a reliable fuel supply. Because keeping pumps fueled keeps business pumping and communities moving right now.